Chain of Gold is the first book in the Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare. It is also the sequel to the Infernal Devices, and in this video, I'll share my thoughts and opinions on this book. Since this is Cassandra Clare's most recent Shadowhunter series, there will be spoilers, so there's your warning. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. I'd rate this book a 4.7 out of 5 stars. It's a great book. It has amazing characters, an enjoyable plot, and overall it's just the average experience you'd get if you read a Shadowhunters book. With that thought, I wasn't fully surprised by the premise or the plot as much, because I've been reading Cassandra Clare's books since 2021, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. So now, let's talk about some characters. First, let's have James Herondale, Will and Tessa's son, and one of our main characters. I would say that James is a great character. He's kind, selfless, and pretty much a great friend, but something about him seemed a bit off for me for some reason. It involves his relationship with his girlfriend Grace Blackthorn, and right off the bat, I sort of had a bad feeling about Grace for some reason. I don't know if I'm just biased because I wanted James to end up with Cordelia Carstairs and not Grace, but I don't know, there was always something off about Grace's relationship with James. I try to brush it off whenever reading, but now that I finished this book, I knew I was right to feel something about Grace. It turns out that Grace has been manipulating James's feelings with a silver bracelet, and that's why he's in love with her. This made me instantly dislike Grace, and until now, I just don't like her. I've heard some fans say that Grace will be redeemed eventually, but right now, I just don't feel any sympathy for her. The next character I want to talk about is Matthew Fairchild, aka James's Parabatai. Out of all the characters in this book, I would say that Matthew is by far the most hilarious one. Every time he appears in this book just brings up the mood, and I just enjoyed reading more because of him. What intrigues me though about Matthew was this part of the book when he went to the statue of Jonathan Shadowhunter and confessed that he killed someone. What's weirder is that there's no explanation whatsoever that comes after this scene, so it just felt really random, but I'm sure Cassandra's can explain that soon enough. Another character that I really enjoyed reading about was Cordelia Carstairs. Cordelia is a Shadowhunter who's in love with James, and throughout this book, I wanted them to end up together so badly. That didn't happen because of Grace, but still, I was always rooting for them. What made me more intrigued about Cordelia and James's relationship was that despite being quote-unquote in love with Grace, I could tell that deep down, James loved Cordelia way more. It's seen in the many moments they have together. And speaking of Cordelia, I don't think I can't mention her brother Alastair. Right off the bat, Alastair wasn't a favorite of mine, and right now, I just don't really know what to feel about him. He had my sympathy because of what he had to go through because of their father Elias, and Alastair stated he's been trying to protect Cordelia from the dark side of their father, but my opinion of him changed towards the end part of this book. It turns out that Alastair spread a rumor that Gideon and Charlotte had an affair, and that Matthew was the bastard son from it. This made my opinion of Alastair worsen, and this makes James and the rest dislike Alastair even more, and honestly I couldn't blame them. That rumor was horrible. Another aspect about Alastair that I want to talk about was his relationship with Matthew's brother Charles. Charles and Alastair as a couple was something that I didn't expect, and honestly, I feel bad for Alastair in this situation. You know, when I realized that Charles was actually the child Charlotte was pregnant with in the Infernal Devices, I got pretty disappointed. Charles is a jerk, to say the least, and his fall with Alastair was something he deserved. Speaking of Alastair's romantic life, I also had to give Thomas-Lightwood a mention. Thomas is Gideon and Sophie's son, and he and Alastair had a few romantic moments here and there, like that trip they took to Paris, but because my opinion of Alastair isn't really the best at the moment, I'm feeling a bit iffy with this budding romance, because I want Thomas to end up with someone he deserves, and I just don't think Alastair is going to be that person. Like, compared to Alastair, Thomas is a way better person, and I just feel like he might get his heart broken if he just goes with Alastair, especially because of the horrible rumor that Alastair made about Thomas's dad Gideon. I don't know how Cassandra's going to go about that, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thomas has a cousin named Christopher Lightwood, and I sort of had to remind myself throughout this book that Christopher was not Charlotte and Henry's son because of the striking similarities that Henry and Christopher had. Christopher is a scientist, and like Matthew, he has a nice and easy-go-lucky kind of personality, and he just lifts up the mood of everything. His godfather is Henry, and he wanted to become a scientist as well, and he's a nice friend. You know, I just realized, like, out of all the characters, Christopher is pretty much the chillest guy compared to the rest. The rest of the characters have problems, like James and his relationship with Grace, and his demonic powers, Cordelia and her relationship with James and her father being in prison, and then you have Matthew with his drinking and his dark secret, Alastair with his relationship with Charles and Thomas, Thomas and his relationship with Alastair, Lucy and her relationship with Jesse. Like, Christopher sorta got the light side of everything. But anyway, let's also shed some light on Lucy Herondale, James's little sister who can summon the dead and command them. Something that's pretty prominent in Lucy's character is that she wants to be a writer and she can talk to a ghost named Jesse. Jesse as a character is a pretty neat addition to me, and I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like Jesse and Lucy will end up together, which I don't really understand how that's gonna work. I mean, Jesse's a ghost and Lucy's a human, so how's that gonna happen? Again, this is the first book, so I shouldn't start speculating, but I'm just wondering how. Aside from all these characters, the main plot circulates on Belial, a prince of hell who was Tessa's biological father and essentially James and Lucy's grandfather, and he plans to use James as a human host to go back to the mortal world. Belial tried doing this in the Infernal Devices through Tessa, but it didn't work out, so now Belial plans to do it through James. With this, I have to talk about the final battle against Belial, because in that fight, Cordelia wounds Belial with Cortana, and that was able to weaken him so much. You know, this sort of makes me question just how powerful Cortana is. I mean, it was able to weaken a prince of hell, break the mortal sword in the dark artifices, and even go to great lengths as being useful in Edom. It's hella powerful, and I just don't understand how exactly. Okay, so throughout this video, I've been praising Cassandra's work in this book, but there were a few things that I didn't really like. The first thing is the number of characters. I know I already explained and gave my thoughts on a couple of characters, but if you try reading this book, there are way more people, and sometimes it gets pretty confusing. It was tolerable for me because I read the Infernal Devices, and I was able to understand the family trees mentioned throughout this book, but despite that knowledge, I still got a bit confused a few times, especially with the Lightwood family. It's probably because both Gideon and Gabriel Lightwood are brothers, and then they got married and had kids of their own. Like, Gideon had 3 kids with Sophie, and Gabriel had 3 kids too with Cecily. So I keep mistaking their kids as siblings when some are actually cousins, like Christopher and Thomas. Christopher was Gabriel's son, and Thomas was Gideon's, and they both share the Lightwood name, which sometimes makes me think that Thomas and Christopher are actually brothers, when they're actually cousins. This goes the same for Christopher's sister, Anna. I keep forgetting that Anna's actually Christopher's sister and not Thomas's. The family tree mix-up was actually a bit too much for me at times, that it even prompted me to make a family tree on paper based on memory to figure out who the hell was who. The other thing I didn't like was the majority of the book. It felt like exposition instead of the actual plot. Cassandra Clare introduces a lot of characters. She gives each background and backstories, and there's just a bit too many flashbacks and talking instead of the final action. I mean, generally speaking, Shadowhunter books are pretty character-centered, come to think of it, but it was a bit too much at times for me. Despite this, I tried to look at it in a different light and see Cassandra Clare's point. Cassandra did this to add depth and connection to the characters, and I had to admit, it worked. She made me care for the characters way more than I expected, so I guess her hard work paid off. So now, I'll answer the question, what do I think of the ending? So the book basically ends with James and Cordelia getting married to cover up something that happened in Tatiana Blackthorn's house. But overall, it's quite sad because James is still in love with Grace, and Cordelia feels heartbroken. I would say that the fake marriage proposal was actually a pretty smart move on Cassandra's part, because though the marriage was fake, Cordelia and James might actually bond together and fall in love, despite the bracelet's power. Overall though, I love reading this book, and I'm glad I was able to read it. So how about you? What do you think of this ending? Let me know in the comments down below.